a hand that had ended lives and commanded empires cupping her cheek with shocking tenderness. His thumb lightly traced the soft curve of her jaw. "Do not ever apologize for the space you occupy, Chloe," Dominic said softly, his eyes burning with an intensity that pinned her to the spot. "You are not too much. You have never been too much. You are magnificent." Tears pricked the corners of Chloe's eyes. "Dominic, this was supposed to be a business arrangement, a political shield for you. You don't have to pretend." "I do not pretend," he replied, stepping even closer, his chest brushing against hers. "I brought you here to protect you, yes. But I kept you by my side because in a world full of vipers, you are the only honest, beautiful thing I have ever known. I look at you, Chloe, and I see a queen. I see my wife." He leaned down, his gaze dropping to her lips. Chloe's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She tilted her chin up, entirely surrendering to the pull of gravity between them. When Dominic kissed her, it wasn't a tentative, polite brush of lips. It was acclaiming. It was deep, possessive, and entirely consuming. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her heavy, soft body flush against his hard, muscular frame, letting her feel exactly how much he desired her. Chloe gasped into his mouth, her hands tentatively coming up to grip the lapels of his suit jacket. For the first time, she felt entirely cherished, entirely safe, and entirely loved. But the universe, cruel and unforgiving, chose that exact moment to shatter their peace. Click. The lavish crystal chandeliers overhead instantly died. The ambient hum of the estate's climate control ground to a halt. The room was plunged into absolute suffocating darkness. Dominic broke the kiss instantly. The tender, loving man vanished in a microsecond, replaced entirely by the apex predator. He shoved Chloe behind him, his hand already smoothly drawing the heavy, suppressed Glock from his shoulder holster. "The backup generators," Chloe whispered, panic spiking in her chest. "Why aren't they turning on?" "Because someone cut the hard line before the switch." Dominic growled his eyes, scanning the darkness. The shadows of the moonless night bled through the windows, which means they have the old blueprints. Before Chloe could process the horror of what that meant, the muffled, heavy thwip-thwip-thwip of suppressed gunfire echoed from the first floor, followed by the shattering of expensive glass. The estate had been breached. "Shoes off!" Dominic ordered, his voice a sharp, clinical whisper. "They make too much noise on the hardwood. Move!" Chloe didn't hesitate. She kicked off her heels, the adrenaline instantly overriding her fear. She was terrified, but she trusted the man standing in front of her with her very soul. Dominic grabbed her hand in a vice-like grip, leading her out of the master suite and into the pitch-black hallway. The air already smelled faintly of ozone and burning cordite. "Maria!" Chloe gasped quietly as they moved toward the secondary staircase. "Is she?" "Maria sleeps in the West Wing. The panic room in the basement automatically locks down from the inside when the perimeter fails. She is safe," Dominic replied smoothly, his eyes darting toward every shadow his weapon raised. "My men are outside, but they are pinned by the initial assault. We need to reach the library. There is a reinforced steel door and a weapons cache." They descended the back stairs silently. The darkness was absolute, save for the faint, sweeping beams of tactical flashlights cutting through the grand foyer below. Arthur O'Connor's men were moving through the house like a pack of hunting dogs, executing a precise sweep and clear maneuver. "Check the east wing," a gruff voice echoed through the marble halls. "The bull wants Moretti alive, but shoot anyone else you see." Dominic pulled Chloe tight against his chest, pressing her back against the cool plaster of the hallway wall just outside the library. He peeked around the corner, 3 heavily armed men in tactical gear were advancing down the corridor, their laser sights sweeping the expensive artwork. Dominic didn't wait for them to find him. He stepped out of cover with terrifying liquid grace. Thwip, thwip, thwip. 3 suppressed shots rang out in less than a second. The 3 enforcers dropped to the floor, instantly neutralized before they could even squeeze their triggers. It was a display of lethal efficiency that reminded Chloe exactly who the man she had just kissed truly was the most dangerous Don in the Midwest. "Go," Dominic whispered, shoving the heavy oak door of the library open. Chloe hurried inside, moving past the towering bookshelves. Dominic followed, but before he could slam the door shut and engage the steel reinforcements, a harsh, painfully familiar voice echoed from the end of the hall. "Don't shut the door, Dominic, or I tell them to burn the whole house down with you in it." Chloe froze, the blood turning to ice in her veins. She peered around Dominic's broad shoulder. Stepping over the bodies of the fallen enforcers was Ridge Perry. He looked ghastly in the beam of the flashlights held by the 4 massive O'Connor hitmen flanking him. His face was pale, sweaty, and twisted into a grotesque, triumphant sneer. He leaned heavily on his cane, a cheap pistol trembling in his free hand. "Ridge!" Chloe breathed utter disbelief, warring with a sickening wave of revulsion. "Surprised to see me, Chloe?" Ridge mocked, his voice echoing in the grand hallway. "I told you I was going to get my life back. You thought you could just steal my house, hide behind a mob boss, and play dress-up like you're some kind of Mafia queen. Look at you, squeezed into a dress that costs more than my car. You're still just a fat, pathetic joke." Dominic's posture shifted. The cold, calculating tactical mindset evaporated, replaced by a volcanic, terrifying rage. His finger tightened on the trigger of his Glock. "I warned you, Perry!" Dominic growled, his voice echoing like rolling thunder down the corridor. "I told you what would happen if you ever spoke to her again. You're not in a position to make threats, Moretti." Ridge screamed, practically vibrating with manic, misplaced confidence. "The O'Connors have the estate surrounded. Your guards are dead or pinned. Put the gun down, hand over the deed to my house, and give me the girl. Arthur might let you live if you beg." "You think this is about a house?" Dominic said, softly, almost to himself. He stepped fully into the doorway, completely blocking Chloe from view, exposing his entire body to the 4 hitmen. "You are an insect. Shoot him!" Ridge shrieked, pointing his trembling gun at Dominic. The hallway erupted in a deafening roar of unsuppressed gunfire. Dominic moved faster than humanly possible. He didn't dive for cover. His sole focus was ensuring not a single stray bullet came near the library. He stood his ground in the doorway, returning fire with lethal mechanical precision. 2 of the O'Connor hitmen went down instantly, bullets piercing their tactical vests. But there were too many. A heavy-caliber round shattered the doorframe next to Dominic. A split second later, another round tore directly through Dominic's left shoulder. The impact violently spun the massive Mafia boss around. Blood exploded from his shoulder, splattering against the oak door. He grunted, dropping to one knee, his left arm immediately hanging uselessly at his side. "Dominic!" Chloe screamed, pure, unadulterated terror ripping from her throat. She didn't cower. She didn't hide behind the bookshelves. The docile, terrified woman who had wept on a kitchen floor weeks ago was gone, burned away by the love she felt for the bleeding man in front of her. Chloe lunged forward. She grabbed the collar of Dominic's suit jacket with both hands, using every ounce of her heavy body weight and strength to haul him backward into the library. As he fell back over the threshold, Chloe slammed her hand against the emergency lockdown panel on the wall. Thick, solid steel plates instantly shot down from the ceiling, slamming over the windows, and the doorway sealing them inside a bulletproof vault, just as a fresh hail of gunfire sparked uselessly against the exterior metal. The library was plunged into the dim red glow of the emergency backup lighting. Dominic lay on the Persian rug, breathing heavily, his right hand still gripping his weapon, his left shoulder a ruined, bleeding mess. Chloe dropped to her knees beside him, uncaring as the dark blood soaked into the beautiful emerald silk of her dress. Her hands shook violently as she pressed them firmly against his shoulder wound, trying to stem the flow. "You idiot!" Chloe sobbed, tears streaming down her face. "You stood in the doorway. You didn't even try to hide. You let them shoot you." Dominic let his head fall back against the floor, a grim, pain-laced smile touching his lips. He reached up with his good hand, his bloodied fingers gently brushing a stray tear from her cheek. "I told you." Dominic rasped, his breathing shallow, but his amber eyes burning with unyielding devotion. "I protect what is mine. You are my wife. I would take 1,000 bullets before I let that coward lay a finger on you." Outside the steel door, they could hear the muffled, panicked shouting of Ridge Perry as the reality of the situation finally set in. "They're locked in," Ridge yelled. "Blow the door. We have to get in there." "Shut up, you fool!" one of the surviving O'Connor men roared. "Listen." Through the thick steel, the sound was faint but unmistakable. The distant, rhythmic thwip, thwip, thwip of suppressed gunfire, accompanied by the heavy thundering sound of diesel engines roaring up the driveway. Dominic's grim smile widened slightly as he looked at Chloe. "Ridge thought he knew my security system. He forgot that a Don never relies solely on machines. The Moretti Syndicate reinforcements had arrived. The O'Connor men were trapped inside the house, caught between the steel walls, and an army of merciless, highly trained enforcers. The hard karma Ridge had sought was finally closing its jaws around him. The red emergency lights bathed the reinforced library in a hellish, pulsing glow. Outside the heavy steel plates, the muffled sounds of a one-sided slaughter raged through the opulent corridors of the Lake Forest estate. The initial tactical silence of the O'Connor hitmen had been entirely shattered by the deafening, unsuppressed roar of the Moretti Syndicate's elite guard. It was not a firefight. It was an extermination. Inside the vault, Chloe's entire universe had narrowed to the ruined, bleeding shoulder of the man lying on the Persian rug. Her emerald silk dress, once a symbol of her newfound confidence, was heavily stained with dark, spreading crimson. Her hands were slippery with his blood, but she pressed down with all her weight, her soft, heavy body acting as an anchor to keep him tethered to consciousness. "Keep your head down," Dominic rasped, his voice strained but impossibly calm. Even with a bullet torn through his flesh, his right hand never wavered. The barrel of his Glock pointed steadily at the steel door. "When Matteo gives the clear code, you step behind me. I am not hiding behind a man who is bleeding to death." Chloe sobbed, though her voice carried a fierce, unyielding edge that surprised them both. "I am staying right beside you." Dominic's amber eyes flickered up to her tear-streaked face. In the crimson emergency lighting with blood on her hands and fire in her eyes, she did not look like the terrified accountant he had rescued weeks ago. She looked magnificent. She looked like a Moretti. Outside, the gunfire abruptly ceased. The sudden ringing silence was more terrifying than the noise. Then came the heavy, desperate thud of fists pounding against the exterior steel plates. "Let me in. Please, God, Dominic, open the door." Ridge Perry's voice was completely stripped of its earlier arrogant venom. It was the high-pitched, warbling shriek of a man watching the Grim Reaper walk down the hallway. "They're dead. Arthur's men are all dead, Dominic. They're going to kill me, Chloe. Chloe, please tell them not to shoot me." Chloe stopped breathing. A cold, profound numbness settled over her chest. The man who had abused her, who had mocked her body, who had sold her to the mob, and who had just tried to orchestrate her murder, was now weeping like a terrified child, begging her for salvation. A sharp, rhythmic series of knocks struck the steel. 2 fast, 1 slow, 3 fast. "Boss!" A deep, gruff voice called out. "It's Matteo. The house is purged. We have the rat." Dominic let out a slow, measured breath. He painfully holstered his weapon and looked up at Chloe. "Press the release." Chloe hesitated for a fraction of a second before reaching up and slamming her blood-slicked palm against the control panel. With a heavy mechanical groan, the steel plates retracted into the ceiling. The heavy oak doors were pulled open from the outside. The corridor was a war zone. Smoke hung thick in the air, illuminated by the sweeping tactical flashlights of 24 heavily armed Moretti enforcers. The bodies of the O'Connor strike team littered the marble floors. But directly in the center of the carnage, forced onto his knees, with 2 assault rifles pressed against the back of his skull, was Ridge. His cheap windbreaker was soaked in the blood of the men he had led to their deaths. His aluminum cane was snapped in half a few feet away. When he saw the doors open, he practically collapsed forward, sobbing hysterically. "Dominic, I'm sorry I was out of my mind. Arthur made me do it." Ridge babbled his eyes wide with absolute suffocating terror. He looked past the bleeding Mafia boss and locked eyes with the woman he had tormented for years. "Chloe, baby, please tell him we have history. Tell him I loved you. I'm sick. I need help. I didn't mean any of this." Dominic struggled to his feet, refusing Matteo's offered hand. He swayed slightly, but his sheer, terrifying willpower kept him upright. He stepped out of the library, his boots crunching on broken glass, and looked down at the pathetic creature groveling on his floor. "You brought mercenaries into my home," Dominic said, his voice a lethal vibrating whisper that carried effortlessly through the silent hallway. "You fired upon my family. You threatened my wife." "She's not your wife," Ridge shrieked, panic eroding his sanity. "She's nothing. She's a fat, ugly loser I felt sorry for. She—" Before the enforcers could strike him, Chloe stepped over the threshold. She did not cower. She did not wrap her arms around her waist to hide her heavy curves. She stood to her full height, the blood-stained emerald silk draped over her formidable figure like the armor of a warrior queen. She walked slowly toward Ridge, stopping just inches from where he kneeled. Ridge looked up at her, a glimmer of desperate hope flashing in his eyes. "Chloe, please. Save me. I'll do anything. I'll make it up to you." Chloe looked down at him. She searched her heart for the anxiety, the inadequacy, and the fear he had meticulously implanted there for 3 years. She found absolutely nothing. "You are a very small, very sad little man, Ridge," Chloe said, her voice perfectly steady, echoing with a quiet, devastating authority. "I spent years shrinking myself to make you feel big. I starved myself, I hated myself, and I paid your debts because I thought I was unlovable. But looking at you now, crying in another man's blood because you're too weak to fight your own battles, I don't pity you. I don't even hate you. You are just nothing." Ridge's jaw dropped. The profound, unshakable finality in her voice broke whatever pathetic delusion he was clinging to. Chloe turned her back on him, walking to Dominic's side and gently wrapping her arm around his waist to support his injured side. She didn't look back at Ridge again. Dominic's amber eyes burned with absolute, unadulterated worship as he looked at Chloe. Then he turned his gaze back to Ridge, and the warmth vanished, replaced by the freezing void of the abyss. "Matteo," Dominic ordered softly. "Yes, boss." "Take him to the meatpacking district. The basement," Dominic commanded. "Do not give him the mercy of a quick death. I want him to spend the rest of his very long, very painful life realizing the exact magnitude of his mistake. Make sure he remembers her name with every breath he has left. No, wait. Dominic Chloe. Ridge's screams tore through the hallway as Matteo and another massive enforcer grabbed him by the arms, dragging him backward through the shattered foyer. His fingernails clawed desperately at the marble floor, but he was entirely powerless. The hard karma he had set into motion had finally arrived, dragging him screaming into the dark. 6 months later, the Chicago skyline glittered like a sea of diamonds against the velvet night sky. Inside the exclusive, heavily guarded penthouse of the Moretti Tower, the elite of the city's underworld and its corrupt upper crust were gathered to pay their respects. The war with the O'Connor Syndicate had been brief and brutally decisive. After the failed raid on the Lake Forest estate, Dominic had unleashed the full, terrifying might of his empire. Arthur O'Connor was dead, his territory absorbed, and his lieutenants scattered to the wind. Dominic Moretti was now the undisputed king of the Midwest, his power absolute. But tonight was not a celebration of blood or territory. Tonight was a celebration of power of a different kind. Dominic stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, a glass of expensive bourbon in his hand. His left shoulder still carried a wicked scar, a permanent reminder of the night his empire had almost burned. He wore a custom midnight blue tuxedo, looking every inch the ruthless, untouchable Don. Yet his amber eyes were not scanning the room for threats. They were entirely captivated by the woman standing across the room. Chloe Jenkins, now legally and truly Chloe Moretti, was holding court. She was breathtaking. She wore a custom-designed off-the-shoulder gown, spun from dark ruby velvet, that hugged every lush, heavy curve of her body, before flaring out into a dramatic train. Her hair was swept up in an elegant, intricate style, adorned with subtle diamond pins that caught the chandelier light. She was surrounded by the wives of the commission bosses and powerful politicians, speaking with a calm, radiant confidence that commanded absolute respect. The women who might have once whispered cruel things about her size were now hanging on her every word, desperate for the favor of the Don's formidable wife. A silver-haired commission boss, a man known for his brutal old-world prejudices, approached Dominic, following his gaze. "She is a revelation, Dominic," the older man murmured respectfully. "When you first claimed her, there were whispers. They said she was too soft, too out of place for our world. They said she lacked the aesthetic of a traditional syndicate wife. But she handled the estate accounts, she stabilized the front companies, and she stared down Arthur's men without blinking. You found a diamond in the rough." "She was never in the rough," Dominic replied, his voice a low, warning rumble that made the older man stiffen. The world was simply too blind to see her value, and anyone who ever whispered about her aesthetic will find their tongues removed. Is that understood? Perfectly, Don Moretti. My apologies." The boss stammered quickly, bowing his head and retreating into the crowd. Dominic set his glass down and walked across the ballroom. The sea of dangerous men and glamorous women parted for him instantly, a physical manifestation of his supreme authority. But he ignored them all. He walked straight to Chloe, smoothly wrapping a strong arm around her waist and pulling her heavy, warm body flush against his side. "Are these vultures boring you, my love?" Dominic asked softly, pressing a kiss to her temple. Chloe smiled, leaning into his touch, feeling the solid, unyielding strength of the man who had completely reshaped her reality. "They're just trying to figure out how the fat girl from the South Side ended up running the most profitable legitimate logistics firm in your empire." "They will never figure it out," Dominic growled playfully, his eyes darkening with desire as he looked down at her. "Because they do not possess your mind, your resilience, or your heart. You are the sole reason this empire stands strong." He took her hand, leading her away from the crowd, and out onto the private glass-enclosed balcony overlooking the sprawling, neon-lit city. The noise of the gala faded into a soft hum behind the thick acoustic glass. The night air was cool, but Chloe didn't shiver. She had never felt safer in her entire life. Dominic turned to face her, taking both of her hands in his. The ruthless, calculating mob boss melted away, leaving only a fiercely devoted man. "6 months ago, I told a pathetic coward that you were my wife to save your life," Dominic said, his voice thick with emotion. "It was a tactical lie, but it became the greatest truth of my existence. I do not just want to protect you, Chloe. I want to build the world around you. I want to spend the rest of my days making sure you never doubt your worth for a single second." Chloe looked up at him, tears of profound, overwhelming joy shimmering in her eyes. The terrified, broken woman she used to be felt like a distant, faded memory. She had been forged in fire, protected by a monster who loved her, and emerged as a queen. "You already have Dominic," she whispered, reaching up to trace the faded scar on his cheek. "You didn't just save my life. You gave me the courage to actually live it." Dominic pulled her against him, his large hands resting possessively on her wide hips. He leaned down, his lips brushing against hers. "You are my wife now," the ruthless Mafia boss growled, but this time the words carried no threat, no tactical calculation. They carried only an eternal, unbreakable vow. "And you will be my queen forever." As their lips met in a deep, consuming kiss beneath the glittering Chicago skyline, the shadows of their pasts were finally and permanently erased, leaving only the unyielding light of a love that had conquered the darkness. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more intense, dramatic stories. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Did you love seeing Chloe embrace her power and put Ridge in his place? Do you think Dominic's brutal punishment for Ridge was deserved, or did he go too far? Drop a comment below with your favorite moment from the story, and let us know what kind of romance drama you want to hear next. Thank you for listening.